Good evening. With the time being 7:43, I'd like to call the Government Operations Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Petrilla.
Here.
Werbow.
Here.
Messner.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Fokaitis.
Here.
Folks.
Here.
Bungard.
Here.
Munns. Gem.
Here.
Spellman. Here.
Great. We have nothing for omnibus vote tonight. So first up, item 5A, Bill Hannon's going to make a presentation regarding authorize the city administrator to enter an agreement for the opioid remediation settlement agreement.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Weber. The first item tonight is a resolution authorizing the city administrator to enter into agreements for opioid remediation settlements. So over the last several years, the state of Illinois has, along with other states, entered into various agreements with companies to settle litigation regarding the harmful effects of opioid-related products. These agreements, once entered into by the state, give the city the option to opt into those agreements and receive a portion of the settlement funds. Staff has been bringing these agreements periodically to City Council for approval, and it has been determined to be in the best interest of the city. There's been about eight plus different companies that have been various parties to these settlement agreements, and to date the city has received approximately just over $172,000. These settlement agreements typically come in over a series of 3 to 5 years as part of that process. So the city is in receipt of new agreements with over 10 different companies as listed out in today's action item. So after discussing with the city attorney and city administrator, we determined to be in the best interest of the city to opt into these agreements, but also to give the city administrator the authorization to enter into these agreements as they may occur and pop up from time to time.
Thank you, Bill. Is there any questions regarding this? Go ahead.
Bill, is there a timeline when we'll find out when we get a settlement, or is it just kind of up in the air?
So the settlement amounts are typically spelled out ahead of entering into the settlement agreement, so we know what those are ahead. We know what those are ahead of time. Typically, with each one, it varies to be about $5,000, $10,000.
Okay, all right.
With that, I'm looking for a motion. Second to approve. Moved by Gem, seconded by Bongard. Roll call, please.
Petrilla.
Yes.
Werbow.
Yes.
Esther.
Yes.
Fokaitis.
Yes.
Folks.
Yes.
Bungard.
Yes.
Gem.
Yes.
Spellman.
Yes.
Great. That motion carries. Next up, we have item 5B. Bill Hannon's going to lead a discussion regarding the tax levy process. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Chair Weber. So this next item is a presentation on additional information regarding the tax levy process, continuing some additional information that we presented about a month ago. At that meeting in August, we touched a little bit on some of the specific final numbers that we had for the 2024 tax levy and the final rate and the upcoming pension levy component. So tonight we're going to get a little more background about the levy process, key dates, factors that go into the recommendation for a specific levy, and just a slightly deeper dive into a couple topics related to that. So there are about 12 slides in total if you're keeping count, and they'll be made available after this meeting. All right, there we go. So kind of in a Q&A format, the first, kind of topic is how important are property tax revenues to the city. We've talked about this many, many times. Property taxes are almost 25% of all city revenues and are important revenue source funding critical services to the community. And really, they provide what we call basic foundational funding to support service levels. These revenues don't fluctuate based on what's happening with either the local or the state economy, like sales tax, alcohol tax, hotel tax, and some of those types of revenues. So it kind of provides a little bit of a hedge against some of the fluctuations we might see from time to time with those revenue sources. They're also not subject to state changes like LGDF and the state shared income tax revenues that the state provides on a per capita basis. So we really look at those as sort of a foundational funding source for the city's general fund. So what is the property tax levy cycle? I tried to sort of highlight from our perspective some of the key meetings and dates and timelines that are a part of that process. So in July, we've received the updated police and fire actuarial evaluations, and we shared those at the last meeting that we had on this topic. And typically from August through September, we're starting the process of taking a review. What's the city's fiscal outlook? You know, what are the metrics? What are other considerations that we want to take into account when it comes to recommending the tax levy increase? So we are right here right now in September, kind of continuing those discussions both internally and at this meeting. The next official act would be discussion of an official levy estimate recommendation at the October 20th Government Operations Committee meeting. That would then be approved at the November 3rd City Council meeting as the official estimate. And the city needs to do an official estimate to start that statute clock of at least 20 days before the City Council would actually approve a tax levy ordinance. So we need to actually approve that estimate first before we'd actually approve the levy. The actual tax levy ordinance will be approved on December 1st. And one of the things I just wanted to note here is that unlike other types of revenue or tax proposals that might come, we have to approve a levy every single year. We have to file that levy by the fourth Tuesday or the last Tuesday of December. If we fail to do that, we are out of the tax levy revenue of $15 million for the next upcoming year. So we need to have a sort of consensus to get something approved at that first meeting in December. There's some additional back and forth between the city and the county in terms of the tax levy amounts and paperwork that we file, reviewing the extensions, but then essentially those property tax bills are issued in May. And then as we've talked about before, we typically receive that money in the months of June and September, and a sprinkling of little money in between those months and before and after. So that's kind of just the overview of the tax levy cycle. I just wanted to highlight from our perspective. There's other steps that involve the townships and the counties, but I didn't want to get into that level of detail. So this is what, on the right-hand side, this is what a typical property tax bill looks like. I don't expect anyone to be able to actually read that. But I did want to point out in the graphic that we have on our website that the City of St. Charles portion of the property tax bill is just under 10%. It used to be about 10.4% last year, and it's down to 9.9%. I did want to blow up the two line items on that tax bill and highlight the St. Charles City components of that. So the county takes our tax levy and puts it into two buckets, one for pension and one for other purposes. And you see those two portions separated out on the property tax bill. So when you add those two up, you get the dollar amount and the tax rate for that current tax levy year. One of the things I mentioned last month was that the 2024 property tax rate was 0.7343. That was an 11% decrease from the 2023 rate. There's a lot of different factors that went into that, but that was overall a pretty significant decrease in the overall property tax rate. So the purposes of property taxes and what they fund and what's the history of the city tax levy. The components on the left are the general components we've discussed in various tax levy presentations. The general purposes are up at the top: corporate, fire, police protection, mental health board purposes, and the other section, the other bucket, referencing the bill and the previous slide that we just looked at, the other bucket being the pension components of $7.5 million. So those two components total the $14.865 million property tax levy that was approved last year. The chart to the right shows the history of the tax levy going back 14 years to 2010. The levy was level for about 8 years. Then some moderate increases were applied to the levy after that, starting in 2018, and you can see the percentages applied in each of those years to the levy. So what is the recent history of the levy breakdown? So this chart goes back to 2014, not as far back as the previous chart. But this shows the total tax levy at the top and the gray line broken down, and then into the two components below, those two buckets like we discussed. So you can see over the years through the various actuarial evaluations and required police and fire pension funding amounts, the amount allocated for pensions has increased from about $2.7 million to $7.5 million during that time. And what that means is that the amounts available to fund local city services, police, fire, public works, from the property tax dollars has been decreasing, and so that's decreased from the 9.3 million to 7.3 million during that time. So you can see in the last 4, 5, 6 years when there was a moderate increase applied to the levy, essentially the amount available to fund city services is really kind of steady, kind of treading water at that point. We're essentially holding our own because the pension amounts are taking a larger portion out of that tax levy. So it kind of shows you, and we anticipate that trend to probably continue over the next several years. So last year we spent some time talking about the effect of new construction on the tax levy and how that can help, realize additional revenue. And I thought the easiest way to kind of help explain that a little bit better would do a little bit of an illustration in terms of how the county actually calculates the tax levy. So on the left, taking a very basic situation using the 2024 tax levy amounts, we have the city levy of $14.865 million and the total taxable EAV of just over $2 billion. That equates to that tax rate of 2024.7343 if you do the math of your tax levy divided by the total taxable EAV. And I don't want to get too much into certain definitions, but at the end of the day, the taxes paid by a $300,000 fair market value home to the city last year were about $690. And on the left, you see with the highlighted charts what happens when you change one of those numbers. So if you realize, say, $14 million in new construction, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, whatever, in the city, and you add that to the total taxable EAV, you are then able to increase the tax levy by $104,000, and kind of sticking with the math and the basic kind of balanced equations, that is what you would increase the levy if you wanted to keep the tax rate essentially the same. So in that example, you can kind of see the tax rate is the same, the amount that a home pays is the same, but because we've added that additional base, that additional EAV to the city, the levy can be increased in sort, and that increase is absorbed essentially by the new construction that occurred within that year. So that was the easiest way that I could come up with to try and explain that concept a little bit more about some of the benefits that the city realizes with new development. One of the things I wanted to note at the bottom, though, is with those fiscal benefits related to additional tax dollars generated by development only occur if the tax levy is actually increased. So if we have a new residential subdivision with 500 homes, we don't receive any benefit of that if the city is not levying and increasing the tax levy to take it into account that that new EAV has been added. So that new residential subdivision is going to require police, fire services, public works. The streets are going to have to get plowed eventually. And the city isn't going to realize the fiscal benefits of the additional EAV if they don't actually proactively levy for those additional dollars. So it's something that we have to proactively do. It's not something that automatically happens. I just wanted to try and, with this illustration, kind of explain that in a little bit more detail. One question that was also asked is, what is the impact of not increasing the levy? So obviously there's a cumulative overall impact to that in future years. There's decreased revenue for funding our increasing operating costs, and future financial challenges can become more difficult or disruptive to address going forward. So I did a very simple illustration here to kind of show what that impact is. So in 2025, if we had the levy increased by 3% or 0% in this chart on the right, you can see the difference in tax levy dollars for 2025 is $445,000 based on our current levy of $14.8 million. The difference in 2029 would be $501,000 as that difference spreads out based on different base numbers, and a 3% factor is applied to both years. Over that 5-year period, the total property tax dollars not received as a result of that 0% levy is about $2.4 million. So there is definitely a cumulative effect on some of those with that impact, and if you extrapolate that to 2 or 3 years, you can kind of see what the greater cumulative impact of that could be with increasing or not increasing the levy. Another question that came up is, can other revenues changes be considered? The answer is yes. other revenue changes can be considered in lieu of a moderate levy increase for an upcoming year. I've listed some of the familiar ones that we've mentioned in different discussions. Each option would have its own pros and cons. It takes some time to analyze and discuss the impact. Some of these might be more suited to funding capital projects specifically and not necessarily as a replacement for a levy increase, but those are options that are out there. So how does the levy relate to next year's budget? At the beginning, we said that the tax levy, the way we look at it, is really the base foundational revenue source for next year's budget. And once we know what that foundational revenue source is, we can build out the budget from there. The levy, looking forward, does provide some increases for some known costs. We have collective bargaining agreements where we know what those costs are, and we can kind of show an example of that on the next slide. And really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of factors that go into this consideration. What is the city's overall fiscal picture? What's our short and long-term outlook? What progress have we made on fiscal goals and other metrics? So there's a lot of different things, both short and long-term, that go into a levy recommendation. I just wanted to illustrate that and kind of our approach in terms of how this relates to the budget. So what are some of the specific fiscal considerations for the levy? One of the things I wanted to do before I kind of touch on those points, the chart on the right, that's essentially a four-year illustration of the total personnel costs in the general fund. And I think as been discussed before, personnel costs are roughly 67% of all general fund expenditures. And with the nature of those costs and collective bargaining agreements and various other things, those things increase incrementally every year, essentially. And you can see the breakdown with those different components between salaries, health insurance, pensions, and then you see the line for tax extensions. That shows, with these moderate increases in the tax levy and our tax extension, we can try at least keep pace with what some of those costs are in total, looking at on a year-over-year basis. I did note on the side there that we do have existing CBA commitments for next year. As an example, we know that those agreements are increasing by 3.5% to 3.75%. We've had increases in other personnel costs related to health insurance. A lot of those medical trends and medical inflation numbers are looking around 8%, 10% year-over-year increases. And there's also potentially need for incremental changes in staffing levels on a year-to-year basis. So as the city gets built out, there's more residential development, commercial development. Like we kind of illustrated a little bit before, that development, those residents need services. And while it's not a clear delineation, though we can see and come to the point where we do need to increase staffing to try and address some of those things. One of the factors I wanted to just mention at the bottom too, we have had to subsidize our general fund, not subsidize our general fund, we've had to subsidize our water fund via some of our general fund monies. And that's one of the things that goes into kind of our considerations for this upcoming year. We are doing that utility rate study, but based on what the timing of those rate changes may be, we may need to ultimately consider some sort of bridge funding, depending on what that revised rate structure ultimately is. We may need to take a look at a very moderate portion of our general fund reserves to try and get this to a certain point. So that's just another factor that we're taking into account as we're walking through some of these discussions. So what is the next step? Like I mentioned before, we know what the actuarial valuations for police and fire. Those amounts are 1.8% more than the total levy last year. So those specific levy components for police and fire will be specifically incorporated into the tax levy no matter what happens with those other components. And then staff is set to present a formal recommendation for next year's levy at the October 20th GOC. The levy tentative range for that is around 3.5% to 4%. So that's the conclusion of the additional information and presentation, and happy to discuss.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Bill. Do we have any questions right now? Go ahead, Vicki.
Thank you for the presentation. Would you be able to compare what we're requesting to other towns of our size or near us?
It's still really early in the process for most towns. I've not heard anyone specifically, but It really also depends on if they're home rule, non-home rule, and various other things. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have any other indications of what other towns may be thinking about at this point.
Or maybe where we are today and just are our taxes relatively high or not is what I'm trying to get a better feel for.
I mean, this range of a levy recommendation potentially is within range of what most other towns do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Bill, thanks for your presentation. Just some questions for clarity. So,
Sure.
October 20th at the Government Operations Committee meeting, you're gonna present a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Are we gonna go over the budget prior to that to kind of go through that? Is that something we're gonna do?
If there's some budget type discussions that you want to have as part of that, we can look into that.
Okay, I would.
Okay.
I think that's important to kind of go, I mean, we don't need to go line by line, but I think it's important to go through it. If we're asking for money from a tax increase for constituents, I'd like to be able to justify it, like it's going for pensions, general purpose. What specifically is it going?
Right.
Is it going to be lead pipes? What is it going for? I would like to explore a couple of the other alternatives. You had one with fees and a few other things in there, or something like that. I think would be worth exploring. Where are we at with the LGTF? Where are we at with that? Is it going up, down? Is it stayed the same?
So there has not been any significant changes to what is being deposited into the LGTF, as far as I know. I think the revenue collections have been about what we expected. So again, just to clarify for everyone, that's the income tax revenue the state shares with municipalities, and it's shared on a per capita basis. So I've not heard any additional information on changes with that. I think it's been largely coming in as expected. That does vary a lot because essentially that's corporate and individual income tax revenue, and that can swing wildly based on how people are remitting that and then ultimately filing their tax year-end tax returns.
And Alderperson Warble, that is something that we do request every year through a lot of our Metro West COGs to increase that percentage. It's something that as local government we've been asking for since they reduced it. They have not gone incrementally up, as Director Hanna said, in the last several years. We did get a small, I think it was like a 0.3% increase a couple years ago. Last year it stayed flat, but it is something we continue to push, but has been met with resistance from the state.
Okay, two more questions and I'm done. Between September and October, could you give us a budget, whether we're having a surplus or where we're at? Could you tell us where we're at? Are we having a surplus when we get to this point? Could you tell us where we're at overall with our budget? And then if we decided, if there's like a 4% increase, could we say a specific amount goes for a specific project? Is that possible to do?
Yeah, so I think from a levy perspective, we're looking at, for one, funding our pension commitments.
Right.
And then any leftover dollars are essentially, if any, are essentially towards, general fund operational costs. And to your question about budget, we're looking, when we have these conversations internally, we're not looking at the levy as a way to balance a current year or next year's budget. We're looking at what is budget potentially going to be like 3 years or 4 years from now. And so what type of potential structural issues might we have? So we can try and pull some things together to have that conversation. But really from a financial strategic standpoint, we're looking long term with this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, David.
Regarding the other revenue sources, I know you kind of touched on that in your presentation and with Brian's questions. I mean, can we decide we've been talking about it. I know, personally in your office, and we've talked to Heather about it. Can we just legitimately start talking about it like a natural gas tax or a fuel tax?
Sure.
I know there's some research you mentioned involved, but can we start that? I mean, let's actually talk about it.
And I think it's definitely an exploration we can have in terms of alternate revenue sources. I think what Director Hanna was talking about is that this is a 1-year solution because a lot of those revenue sources are not increasing at the same rate that our property taxes are, and that is our foundational amount for things like our core services. So it can offset any single year, but we're not going to see the growth in those the same way that we do in our property tax levy that continue to fund the increases that we're subjected to fund those basic core services. So like I said, it can be in partnership with those or to reduce any specific year, but that will not alleviate the need for increases as we go over time.
And that's fine. I'm just want to talk about it. I'm not suggesting that that's a talking point, but just a discussion in terms of, I just want to, I want to know more about what can be done, you know, in terms of, I know we're home rule, so we have some levers to pull, so let's talk about it. So that's all I've been curious. Thanks.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Folks.
One thing to kind of piggyback off of Alderperson Warble's ideas, looking at our budget, and I think you guys do a wonderful job of this, but knowing what we have coming up and what we're asking for, and I guess this is more from a department head point of view, what specifically in your areas are our needs? Because to Alderperson Warble's point of view, if we're trying to construct this budget and look at it before we pass what we're going to pass, it'd be nice to just give those answers to our constituents when they're asking, hey, where, other than pensions like you're talking about, but is there a big need, like, you know, we didn't get the loan, so what's lead pipe look like? What's that going to take out? What's it going to look like to do the trunk main that we put off for a year? What's it going to look like for other infrastructure needs that are going to, the levy could help do that? So I think to have some of those answers would just be helpful before the October 20th meeting, if that's something we can put in place, and at least then we can have those discussions up here as a group, among us as well. Because again, I know this comes up every year, we have some discussions, but the more that we can see ahead of time, I think it makes some decisions for us a little easier. That's just my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Bill, can you go back to the bar graph that showed the percentage, the levy percentage by year?
Yeah.
Can you just walk us through again what?
Is it the one, the green bar?
There you go. So you got 4%, 1, 9, 2, 3, 4, 9, 3, 4, 3, 1. I mean, kind of all over the map. So I hear what you're saying about wanting to set a 3-4 year strategic plan so that we're not coming back every year and feeling like, and we have to vote on this every single year and pass it, but a little bit from, you know, from your perspective of, is it fair to assume 3.5% to 4% is probably a recommendation you are going to be coming to the podium for over the next 4 years, given all the things we have to do? Is 3.5% to 4%, whatever you said, a starting point? And the reality is it's probably more like, you know, you see 4%, 4.9 on there. Just try to get a gauge of, you know, because this is all over the place.
Sure. And I think there were probably specific things that went into each year and what those discussions were in terms of what that recommendation was. So I think that's fair to say. There's a lot that can happen in 1 year. There's a lot of things that can happen with, you know, with the economy, with what happens, you know, with various pension valuations. You know, so while from my perspective, we would never look to a large property tax increase to balance a budget. You know, we would look to other sources to do that. But this is a piece that we want to try and, to your point, keep in that neighborhood. And so I think that's a fair assumption to make, especially with the pension funding commitments that we have and the increase in the cost of providing services. I think that 3.5% to 4% is fair. That, you know, it would be within that ballpark every year.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. One of the concerns I have with property tax is that it affects all of our residents. If you go with some of the other taxes, other people come in town and they pay the tax, we use it for our use only. Okay? So I'd like to look at other alternatives. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'd rather keep something that non-residents pay to support what we need. That's like we did the grocery tax.
Yep.
2/3 of that was paid for by non-residents, correct? If I remember?
Yep.
That's why I'd like to see something of that nature instead of going with a property tax, because that affects every homeowner in town. It doesn't get paid by non-residents.
We don't need any action on this item. It was just a presentation, so thank you very much.
Thank you,
Director
Bill.
Hannah.
Thank you.
And Bill, you did say we'll get this after?
Yes.
So no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next up, we have public comments.
I guess I might as well get up and talk. Why not? Steve Leffler, Ron, to your point, you guys, and David, to your point, you're looking for alternative revenue sources that won't affect the community quite as much as maybe we pull some revenue in from other places. And I might propose to you, after being in the automotive repair business and the tire business for 35 years, that you guys have a boatload of tire stores in this town, way more than you need, and it draws from all over, from other communities. Not just tire stores, but a variety of auto repair shops and big dealerships. And they all sell a lot of tires. And as a home rule city, you can levy a tire use impact fee of, say, $5 a tire. You probably have 100,000 tires sold in this community. That'd be $500,000 you could raise every year. $5 per tire, you buy a set of tires once every 3 years. Per car, it's running $1,200 now for a set of tires. You're not going to notice that $20, but it'll certainly make a dent in your budget over the course of a few years. So that's an idea that I've had kicking around for a little while, and I thought I'd let you know. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment? Do not see anybody else. Additional items from mayor, council, or staff? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, actually, kind of in the same vein as Brian's question about the ordinance regarding the motorbikes, are we going to see an ordinance about, or at least a draft regarding the timing for construction?
That will be presented next week at the P&D meeting. There'll be a very full agenda next week.
Perfect. Thank you.
You can go.
All righty then. We will need to go into executive sessions for pending, probable, or imminent litigation. So with that, I need a motion and second to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Kem, seconded by Wirball. All those in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. All righty. With that being said, if you are...